G'day guys, you're back with Miracle Max. Today in the workshop is my old faithful motorbike, Kawasaki. He's not feeling too well. In fact, he hasn't been feeling well for quite some time. He's got a bit of a severe miss, particularly when cold, and it's lacking power. What's wrong with it? I don't know. Let's check it out together. Because this 550 mainly does short runs, it does tend to foul up spark plugs, which I try and replace on a reasonably regular basis. But this is more. This is something totally wrong. So what I'm going to do is take you guys for a road test, if at all possible. Hopefully you can hear the miss that I hear as I ride the bike. The most important thing that you can do is try and reproduce the customer's complaints, and in this case, hey, I'm the customer. So I'm going to go for a road test and give it a burl and see if I can reproduce that missing, that hesitation. No, it's definitely a miss. It's not really happy at all. So let's go for a quick road test. Starts all right. Hear that miss? I'll let it warm up first and then we'll go for a cruise up the road, see what we can find. Honestly, it shouldn't take too long to hear this miss. It's actually quite bad. So, particularly when it's loaded, you can hear the thing cough and fart. So let's give it a burl. There you go, hear that? So it's only a little cough and fart to start with. But, yeah, you might want to move, mate. Hear that? There you go. Not happy Jan. Okay, it's clearly got a cylinder, or maybe even two that are missing, hey? Okay, we'll turn around, head back to the workshop. If I can get there. Cool. All right, well that's given us some sort of a diagnostic path to follow. Let's check it out. Just to let you in on a bit of a secret, I've done some diagnosis on the vehicle off camera about a week ago, I guess. Now remember I said that the spark plugs tend to foul up and I replaced them as a matter of course. And yes, I've gone ahead and replaced those spark plugs, but it's still not very healthy, as you heard out in the road test. By the way, sorry about the footage. I had the camera attached to the fairing, which is separate from the handlebars, etc. And it vibrated a bit, hey. Sorry about that. So I'm still going to focus on the ignition side of things. That's where I believe the fault is. Firstly, I'm going to pull off the seat, the tank, and then have a look at the ignition coils together with the plug leads themselves. I'm going to start with this side cover here, and of course on the other side as well. That should pull out anyway. There we go. Then the seat, we've got to use the key to get that off, of course. Tank's next. Put our tank to one side. Of course there's an electrical connection on there we need to get rid of. Down here, that does our tank gauge. Disconnected my wiring here, so that tank can now go. For starters, I'm going to rip out the spark plugs on this side, or this bank. Number 1 and number 2 over here. There's 2 ignition coils on this particular model, and this coil over this side takes care of number 2 and also number 3. The coil over the other side does number 1 and number 4. We'll have a look at these spark plugs on the bench and just see how they're firing at the moment. I've got my spark plugs laid out, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see that, well, they're burning reasonably okay. They're nice and square. They are newish. This one's a little bit on the dark side, of course. And this one over here looks absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Third one along is a bit meh. How you going? And fourth one appears to be a little bit wet. So, yeah, I'm going to have a look at the coils next. I'm going to check for the resistance on the coils as well as the plug leads themselves. If you've seen any of my other videos in the ignition series, you'll realise how to check an ignition coil that does 2 spark plugs. It's a waste spark ignition system. So this one here, as I said, it drives number 1 as well as number 4 in this particular case, which is way over that side. So all I'm going to do is check in number 1 plug lead, and then I'm going to check in number 4 plug lead, and we should get some sort of reading. And we've got, what's that, 22.25 kilo ohms. Now, look, I don't know if that's correct or not. The main thing is we've got a reading, haven't we? It's not open circuited or anything like that. But let's compare that to our other ignition coil. We're now going to check the second coil, which looks after cylinder number 2 and 3. So over that side I've got hooked up cylinder number 2, so all I've got to do is cylinder number 3, which is this bloke right here. We had 22 kilo ohms on the other one, and on this one we have 2.1 mega ohms. Well, is that a problem? Let's just double check our connections. We're still within the mega ohm range. That's clearly not good. It looks like it's got a broken down ignition coil. I've tried to find these ignition coils and they're seriously hard to find. I might just have to think outside of the square on this one. The wiring for the coil on this side here, the right hand side, has a yellow red and also a black. I'm going to say that this bloke over here is the positive and this one here is negative. What makes me say that? Let's go over the left hand side. We're now at the left hand side and you can see that there's a yellow red wire here. Now this goes on to the positive. You can see positive here, and the other one, the negative, has a different colour on it. In this case it's green. So this is a positive feed to both coils, 12 volts going onto that ignition coil for both coils. And the triggering is done by this green one, and of course over the other side it's done by that black wire. This is the one that read really high in the mega range, so I'm going to pop this off and have a physical look at this coil. Before I totally condemn the coil or inspect it further, there's one last test I'd like to do. Could it be that these ignition plug leads or the spark plug leads are faulty and therefore giving us an incorrect reading on the coil? Well, we need to pull those off and examine them, don't we? So we just unscrew this particular one. And I've marked it with a white texture so I know which one goes where. I could do it two ways. I could check the plug leads individually to see if they're faulty, or I could just go straight to the source and see if the ignition coil is faulty. Let's do that. So now I'm reading 11.76 kilo ohms. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? That's not a high reading at all. So let's check these plug leads. Number 2 is reading 5 kilo ohms. That's acceptable. So number 3 is reading 5.11 kilo ohms. That's okay. What is the problem? Let's have a closer look at that ignition coil. One of the most important things we can do is have a physical good look at something, and that's called a visual. Now we need to turn it around, examine the towers themselves where the plug leads go into. They look okay. Over this side, the terminals appear to be tight. They don't appear to be broken or anything like that. Let's continue to... Hang on a sec. Hang on. My goodness me. Check this out. Have a look at this dirty, great big whopping crack. The coil's cracked. Not happy Jan. So, could that be creating a breakdown within there? Of course it could. No doubt what's happened is this coil has overheated at some point and actually melted the plastic or expanded inside and blown this little top piece off here. So, look, I don't know about that one. I'll have to see if I can get an ignition coil, but yeah, there's a dirty great big whopping crack in there, isn't there? Not healthy at all. That's not going to make our little sparks and electrons stay inside, is it? It's not going to go to the spark plug. It's going to go off to the side or just be absorbed into electron heaven. I don't know. You may have seen in other ignition videos and EGR videos, all sorts of videos, I've been using this function generator thing that I made. It's called a function generator thingy. That's what I've called it. And that's going to stick, I'm afraid. So what this function generator thingy does is pulse on the negative side. So what that'll do is when the negative side of the ignition coil is turned off, the primary side will collapse the magnetic field and then collapse over the secondary, therefore inducing a high voltage to our spark plugs. Now let's just see what happens. I'll turn it on and I'm going to do it at 1 hertz or 1 time per second. Alright, so that's 1 time a second. Let's crank it up a little bit. That's 54 hertz or 54 times a second. Let's have a look at the spark plugs to make sure that they are actually firing. So you should be able to see there that both are actually firing. They're blue, they're happy, no missing there or breakdown. What else can we try? So I've purposely removed the spark plugs from the leads because I actually want to stress out the coil. I know the coil's knackered, but just for the purpose of this video, I want to see if I can get it to stress out and actually physically break down. The normal test to see if an ignition coil is breaking down is by using an incandescent test light, hook the other end or the alligator end onto ground and just go across here like this and see if we can get a short in there somewhere. I've tried that, nothing works, but have a listen when I turn it on. Remember there's no spark plugs attached, but have a listen. I've just got my microphone here so that you can have a listen too. Can you hear that noise? So it's obviously breaking down inside, isn't it? So look, I don't think there's any other thing that can be done. Is ignition coil needs to be replaced. But hey, like I said, all I can see is used ones, and there is a new one that I can see from China, yeah, on eBay. Yeah, I don't want to do that. So look, I'm scratching my brain. I've got another idea that might work. It's a little bit different, but hey, I'm all about different and trying to make things work. I've managed to borrow a couple of different coils, and I'm going to try and adapt one of these to suit the motorbike. You can see this one over here is actually off an early model Commodore, and the center coil is actually open. But hey, I only need two coils, one there and one there. Another style here, later model Commodore one, which has an ignition coil, a waste spark ignition. So it has a coil within a coil, I guess you could say, and it gets powered up through the primary over this side here. And this fella over here is once again a double coil setup. It has 3 wires going into it, which would be a positive and a trigger for each of the coils. So my main concern is to try and figure out what the resistance of the original coil is and try and match it to one of these fellas, and hopefully I can jerry-rig something. At the moment I'm testing the good, well I assume it's good, coil of the motorbike, and I have 11.74 kilo ohms. That's on the secondary side, of course. And now I've shifted my wires over to the primary side of the ignition coil. That's the 2 terminals that go onto it, and we've got 2.5 ohms. Let's have a look at what these coils have got. Firstly, let's start with this later model sort of Commodore coil. No good, 5.34 kilo ohms. It's miles too low. Put that aside. What about this guy over here? Let's try that on the secondary side. So that's where the plug leads go in. Let's just see what that reads. And we're reading 18 kilo ohms. Yeah, that's out of range as well, isn't it? 18, 19 kilo ohms. Clearly that's no good. Ugh, only one fella left. Now remember, the goal was 11.74 kilo ohms. Let's have a look at what this reads. Hey, 11, that's not too bad, kilo ohms, good. Of course this says open here, so we know that that one is actually physically open. It's no good. Let's check that. As you can see, it's physically open. Let's try that back one. We only need 2. Yes, that works. And we've got 10.72. Look, that's close enough. I'm happy with that. What about our primary? The primary on this one is over the back here. Now we've just got to check there and there for one coil that we're using. And we have 1 ohm. It's a little bit lower than I'd like, but beggars can't be choosers. We'll try this one over here, and we're looking at about 1 ohm as well. So look, those 2 coils in here I believe are okay for the purpose that we want to try. It's worth a shot, I don't reckon. It's an old bike, it has no real electronics in it, so I'm not concerned about damaging something. I just need a basic ignition coil. Okay, my prototype is up and ready. Coil hanging precariously off the front with cable ties. Very nice, Max. Then we come across to here and we have our plug leads all set into place. They're cable tied to other wires so that it's all safe for the road test. So now, yep, road test. Well, I screwed up in a major way there. I completely forgot to press the record button on my other camera to record the sound, this one here, so that didn't do so well, did it? Anyway, it went really well. I was happy with the results. The steering felt weird, that was the only problem, and I'll tell you why. Well, let's have a close look at the front guard there. Can you see this wipe mark here? Now what's happened is, as the forks get compressed, so zoom back there, as the forks are getting compressed, the guard actually rubbed up against the ignition coil plug leads, I guess you could say there, and left a bit of a mark. Not that it's an issue, I'll just have to either raise that coil up higher or put on boots that aren't sticking out quite as much. Now just keep in mind that this is proof of concept only. Before I had a plug lead fall off the coil, shoved it back on, she's all good. Things are cable tied in there. So let's fire up the beast and see how she goes. See if it misses like it did before with that cracked ignition coil. Now looking for that miss that we had before. Yeah, nothing there. Of course, you'll probably experience it more when it's loaded up, so we'll try it loaded up in a higher gear in a while. So let's put it in a higher gear. Maybe go up 2 gears. Now flat knacker, no hesitation whatsoever. So it's just like the old days with Keanu, he's happy as Larry. But yes, proof of concept, as I said. It's pretty damn ugly and not overly secure, but it's given me the confidence to move forward, I guess you could say. So now I know that the concept is okay, I can move forward, bracket it up, get some decent plug leads, etc., and make it a permanent resident of the front of Keanu. So now hopefully through improved CAD systems, that's cardboard aided design, I should be able to make a template or a plate for this coil pack to sit up against here. I can bolt it in place and get rid of my cable ties. For those of you who like a good laugh, I've just made up a bracket for the ignition coil to sit on, which has actually brought it up a little higher than it was before. And I've got it at the bottom of the oil cooler here. I'm actually using the brackets or using the bolts to go through this bracket. I'll show you shortly. And also down the bottom here, down we go, I've made up a support bracket that goes onto the pipes there. Look, it's not professional, I'm not a fabricator by any means, but yeah, it should do the trick, and hopefully it should keep more clearance away from my guard here, and that was a bit of a concern. So yeah, I'll pull it apart and show you how I've built it, and then I'll paint it up, schmick it up, and then put it on and make sure that it works okay. As you can see, I've got a couple of holes drilled in through here, and that's because I've got to access the bolts that hold on the oil cooler here. So the bolts are in here, which I couldn't access once it's in place, so I've drilled those holes there. I've also got to drill an extra couple of holes here, which I realised when I put it back together, because I've got to hook up my primary winding, that's these guys here, and I'm going to have to do it from the inside, because you can see the primary winding connections here, and I can't access those from the outside, so I'll stick a hole through here so I can connect them up and plonk them into place. Look, I'm not even going to pretend that I'm a fabrication guy. I just do whatever I can, but hopefully this will be all right for what I need. I've cut in those holes to allow the wiring to come through, and as you can see here, I've drilled these holes here to allow access to the back brackets. Don't look at the back, I had trouble trying to fold this over, simply because I don't have the equipment. It was done all on a vise and bits of metal to bend it around. The rest didn't come out too bad, I guess. But of course, once you paint it, it'll look awesome. And this little bracket here that I made up, that goes around the pipes and it gets bolted or screwed to the back there with a little bolt, and that fits nicely. And all I did for this guy was use an extension bar and just beat it over the top and flatten it out. Hopefully that'll be alright. It sits alright, it fits alright. In the background you can hear a bit of a heater going, and that's because I'm heating up the workshop so that I can paint my masterpiece. In the meantime, I'm making up a bit of a foam packing for the coil pack. They actually did come out with a standoff, I guess you could say, of foam. Mine's a little bit thicker. I've just made it out of some sort of packing foam that I had lying around and cut a square out of the centre, but that should give us more clearance between our terminals here and the actual metal that goes up against it. So I should be able to plug on those without any shorts or anything. Of course, I've put on insulated terminals, so that won't be a problem. But you know, I just want to give it a bit of clearance, a bit more happy Jan situation happening there. So I might just glue that on there and make sure it's all comfy before I stick it into place. They say paint covers a multitude of sins, but maybe I didn't use enough paint. Anyway, that's the bracket installed. You can see that I've drilled those holes. I've also added some split hose around here so that these wires can come through and not get chafed on the side and short out. Of course, we don't want that. And also I have drilled all these little tiny holes here to allow for the coil to be installed. It's not pretty, but I'm sure that a blind man would be happy to see it. I've also, as these hoses down the bottom here, oil cooler hoses or pipes I guess you could say, I put in some of that packing foam on there as well, just to install it and make sure that it doesn't rub against the piping there. So I'm happy with it. Look, it's good and solid. There's no problems there. It feels okay. I haven't tasted it yet, but I'm sure it's yummy. Yeah, I think it should do the trick just nicely. So time to install the actual coil. So these fellas here have to go on here, and that fella over there, a bit of a stretch. And once that's in place, then I can offer up the coil and bolt it in place. After much hard work, there's your final product, guys. The coil has landed. I've put some conduit on there just to make it look a little bit neater, and I did have trouble timing it, to be quite honest. It was a little bit difficult to get the plug leads set up right, but it's running okay now, and I'm happy with the tidiness of all the wiring, etc. through the conduit, going back through the front fairing there down to the coil. So of course the important thing is, does it start and run? Well, I can say that it has because I've double checked, but you guys probably want to hear it, hey? And now for your viewing and listening pleasure. I'm gonna leave it there tonight, guys. It's 7 o'clock and that was pretty noisy, hey? I'm gonna reassemble it so that I can head off to the college tomorrow for work, but I'll do some more filming later on once it's all assembled, and I'll take it for a decent road test so that you can hear. I've had my dog Russ assisting me. He's been a great help. He loves the sound of the motorbike. Every time I rev it up, he does a circle around the bike. You know, I should really reward him, don't you think? I wonder if they have helmets in dog size and chuck him on the back for a pillion passenger ride. What do you think, mate? Be all right? All right, guys, let's get ready for a road test. So I've got 3 cameras on the bike at the moment, one on my helmet, one facing the coil, and one behind me for your convenience. So we'll just take it for a road test. My main concern is that the ignition coil may hit the front guard yet again, so we'll see what happens, but let's give it a shot anyway, shall we? Right there, I'd reckon it would have hit. I haven't seen it, but alright, so there's no missing there, no hesitation, that's good. But I can feel it in the steering, it's not quite right. Something is not quite right there. So I don't want to go crazy because I don't want to come off my bike and Mrs. Miracle won't be happy with me. So I'll just take it for a quick spin. I have ridden this for about 2 weeks now in its present condition, and yeah, I've been riding it fairly gingerly, but yeah, it seems to go all right. We'll turn around here and head back to the workshop. Yeah, it's a little bit sketchy going around corners perhaps. We'll just see how we go. But power-wise, there's absolutely no issue with it. The Commasaki lives, but the question might be raised is, why? Why did I do it? Well, the main thing was that I couldn't get an ignition coil to suit my bike at the time, poor old Keanu. Then I started thinking to myself, like, how does this ignition coil work? And really all it is a waste spark ignition system. I had a spare ignition coil lying around, the Commodore one that you see there, and thought to myself, would it work? So basically it was an experiment to see if it would work. Is it practical? Not really. As you saw, it keeps hitting that front guard, and that can be quite dangerous. Don't want to get in trouble with Mrs. Miracle. Does it work? definitely works. Plenty of power, no hesitation, no miss. So in principle, it's a great idea, but in practical, well, not so much. Even though I'd classify it as a success, I'm not happy with the safety side of it. So practically, I'm going to head back to one of the original ignition coils, if I can find it, and put Keanu Kawasaki back to his original glory, up under the tank that is. But for now, he's going to have to be happy being a Commasaki. I hope you enjoyed this video today, guys, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and feel free to comment down below. Of course, don't forget about that notification bell. You don't want to miss any future videos. So until next time, guys, this is Miracle Max signing off. I will catch you later.